I'd like to start by saying that the world has been taken over by a fantasy fad. We all love Game of Thrones. Yeah?
No.
People, sex and people. And my go-to place to find books is Pulp Fiction, which is all the way down on Main Street, I think Main Street 8. And I always select from the dollar bin, and this one is great. Now, this is a collection of short stories about mermaids. And the title is Mermaids with an exclamation mark. If you don't believe me, I'll show you. So from now on, I will be referring to it as Mermaids! Edited by Jack Dan and Gardner Dezoy. Okay. It starts with a poem. Be wary, young sailor, of wind and high water. The sea has a secret, the sea has a daughter. She'll swim along starboard and capture your heart with a flip of her tail fin underwater. Depart. You guys fucking ready for this? Hey, remember how I mentioned Game of Thrones earlier? It has a dedication for George R.R. Martin. Sure, he's just like so proud. So proud. Now, before I get in, I'm going to read you one short story, but I should give you, I discovered in reading this book, there are specific rules when you're writing about mermaids. Rule number 1, the only kind of person who can discover a mermaid is a very boring person. Every story starts with an average Joe, nothing important going on in their life, or, as in, She Sells Seashells by Paul C. Darcy Bowles, it opens with, she was a quiet woman, the best kind.
No, you didn't!
So if you want to meet a mermaid, rule number 1, crazy boring. Rule number 2, you will have sex with them, but it's never described how that happens. That was my number 1. I was like, how do you fuck a mermaid? Just like page after page. I'm like, and then he caressed her breast. Cut to the next morning. It's like, no! Where does it go? Is it just a bunch of BJs? Is there just like fondling? Does she have like, no, they don't describe it at all. Okay. They also, in this book, the editors have gone out of their way to give you like a tidbit of the story that you're about to read. And I'm going to read this one. But this one, for if you're wondering, is called The Nebraskan and the Nereid. And they describe it as, here he spins a subtle and elegant tale about a folklorist. That's another thing, rule number 3. If you want to meet a mermaid, I suggest you become a folklorist. Because 80% of the characters are folklorists. They don't really believe in mermaids, but kind of believe in mermaids. And then they meet a mermaid! Who spends his time ranging the rural Greek countryside, collecting old legends and stories, but who certainly does not expect to be collected himself. Now, I'm not going to read this one, but this was a fake out, because what happens in this one is that he goes swimming by himself, and he meets a beautiful woman, and they go into a cave, and they do it, and then the next day, her body washes up on the shore because she died, and it turns out the whole time, the Greek archaeologist, can't talk, he was working with the whole time, she was like, you killed her, and then she turns out to be the mermaid! Fake out! But I'm just going to read you a traditional one. Because it hits all the high points. Boring, not a lot going on, sex happens, don't know how. A Touch of Strange by Theodore Sturgeon. And I'd like you to look for, I think this is a pen named Sturgeon. Come on, you're not fooling anybody. I'd like you to keep your ears open for the most awkward sentences written, besides the book Ian wrote. All right. Whoa, I just said wrote! Red. And also to refer to another part in the show, the reason I was so interested in how mermaids actually have sex is because, as Ryan Steele said, I go all the way. Yeah! Alright, here we go. He left his clothes in the car and slipped down to the beach. Moonrise, Sheets said. He glanced at the eastern horizon and was informed of nothing. Nothing. It was a night to drink the very afterglow, and the stars lay lightless, like scattered talc on the background. So many metaphors for minutes. At moonrise, he muttered. Sorry, that should have been moonrise. Easy enough for her. Moonrise was something in her cosmos that one simply knew about. He had to look it up. Google search, moonrise. Answer, when the moon rises in the sky. Got it. Let's hit the beach. You don't realize, certainly she'd never realize, how hard it is when you don't know anything about it to find out exactly what time moonrise is supposed to be at the dark of the moon. Google. He still wasn't positive, so he'd come early and would wait. He shuffled down the whispering water, finding wit with ears and toes. Woo! Catch me dead, he thought, but it never occurred to him to keep her waiting. It wasn't in her to understand human frailties. Human? What? Is she not a human? Oh, right. We're reading a book called Mermaids! He glanced once again at the sky, then waded in and gave himself to the sea. It was chilly, but by the time he had taken 10 of the fine, strong strokes which had first attracted her, he felt wonderful. He thought, oh well, by the time I've learned to breathe underwater, it should be no trick at all to find moonrise without an almanac. He struck out silently for the blackened and broken teeth of the rock they called Harpy's jaw, with their gums of foam and the floss of tide-risen weed, bitten up and hung from the birds to pick. It was oily calm. Oily calm. Have you ever been like, is calm out? He said oily calm. I know, I'll be using that all the time. He was therefore very close before he heard the singing. What with the surf and his concentration on flanking the jaw without cracking a kneecap the way he had the first time, he was in deep water on the seaward side before he noticed the new quality in the singing. Delighted, he trod water and listened to be sure, and sure enough he was right. It sounded terrible. Mermaid shitty singers. Get your flukes out of your mouth, he bellowed joyfully, you baggy old guano guzzler. I don't know. G-U-A-N-O, guano. Bird poo. Thank you. Bird poo guzzler. You don't sound so hot yourself, chum, came the shrill falsetto answer. And you know what type of fish gut chum I mean. Semen. He swam closer. Oh, this was fine. It wasn't easy to find a for real something like this to clobber her with. Mostly she was so darn perfect. He had to make it up whole, like the time he told her her eyes weren't the same color. Imagine, he thought, they get head colds too. Yeah. And then he thought, well, why not? You mind your big bony bottom-feeding mouth, he called cheerfully, or I'll curry your tail with a scaling tool. He could barely make her out, sprawled on the narrow seaward ledge, something high bar, all dark in the darkness. Was that really your singing, or are you sitting on a blowfish? What? You creep no better in straight-gut school, gull, in a sewer sump, she cried raucously. Why'd you swallow the sea slug or spit it out one? What? Go soak your head in a discovers that she's not a mermaid. At last they said in unison, "But you're not," and let a wave pass in chorus, "I didn't know there was anybody," and opened and closed their mouths, and said together, "You see, I was waiting for..." "Look!" he said abruptly, because he had found something he could say that she couldn't at the moment. "Get a good grip. I'll pull you out. Ready? 1, 2. No, she's in the water. "No," she said, outraged, and pulled back abruptly. He lost her hand, and down she went in mid-gasp, and up she came, strangling. He reached down to help, and missed, though he brushed her arm. "Don't touch me!" she cried. And down he paddled frantically to the rock on which he sat, and got a hand on it. She hung there coughing until he stirred, whereupon, "Don't touch me." "Well, all right," he said in an injured tone. She said aloud, but obviously to herself, "Oh, dear." Somehow this made him want to explain himself. "I only thought you should come out, coughing like that. I mean, it's silly. You should be bobbing around in the water, not sitting on here on the..." He started a sentence about he was only trying to be, and another about he was not trying to be, and when he was able to finish either. Hey, well, let's get so basically what's happening is that these two average Joes both are having sex with mermaids, and both the merman and the merwoman told them to meet them at the cave. Yes. Now that's the strangest thing. I don't know his name either. I don't even know if they have names. Maybe they don't need them. They're sort of different, if you know what I mean. I mean, they know things we don't know, sort of. Feel them. Like if people are coming to the beach long before they're in sight, and what the weather will be like, and where to sit behind a rock on the bottom of the sea so a fish swims right into your hands. And what time's moonrise. Yes, he said, thinking, you suppose they know each other? You think they're out there in the dark watching? You suppose he'll come first? And what will he say to me? Or what if she comes first? I don't think they need names, the girl was saying. They know one person from another, or just who they're talking about by the feel of it. What's your name? John Smith. He said, honest to God. She was silent, and then suddenly giggled. He made a questioning sound. I bet you say honest to God like that every single time you tell anyone your name. I bet you said it 1,000 times and thousands of times. Well, yes, nobody's ever noticed it before, though. I would. My name is Jane Doe. D-O-W, not D-O-E. Jane Doe. Oh, and you have to spell it out like that every single time? Honest to God, they laughed. We are so plain. I'm gonna kill myself. Ordinary. You and your mermaid. He wished he could see her face. He wondered if the mer people were as great a pressure on her as they were on him. He had never told a soul about it. Who'd listen? Who'd believe? Or, listening, believing, who would not interfere? Such a wonder. As had she told all her girlfriends and boyfriends and the boss and whatnot, he doubted it. He could not have said why, but he doubted it. Ordinary, he said assertively. Yes. And he began to talk, really talk, about it because he had not, because he had to. That has a whole lot to do with it. Well, it has everything to do with it. Look, nothing ever happened in my whole entire life. Know what I mean? I mean, nothing. I never skipped a grade in school, and I never got left back. I never won a prize. I never broke a bone. I was never rich, and I was never hungry. I got a job and kept it, and I won't ever go very high in the company, and I won't ever get canned. You know what I mean? Oh, yes! So then, he said, along comes this mermaid. I mean, to me, comes a mermaid, not just a glimpse. No, maybe I did, and maybe I didn't see a mermaid. This is a real-life mermaid who wants me back again, time and time again, and makes dates and keeps them too, for all she's all the time late. So is he. She said in intense agreement. What I call it, he said, leaning an inch closer and lowering his voice confidently, is a touch of strange. I'm gonna leave it there. Basically what happens, merman, lady, they don't show up, but these guys totally do.